Hello and welcome to the Unsung CX Heroes podcast, where we take a brief but deeper look into the practical work of a customer experience professional, someone you might not have known about or had heard about, but hopefully after the next 10 to 15 minutes, you certainly will. I'm Carl Charisse, founder and principal of Horizon CX. We help organizations large and small get started along the customer-centric pathway, or to improve their customer service delivery by better understanding customers' needs through listening to the voice of the customer and delivering key insights that will help drive their business forward. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Danielle Wipperfurth to the program. Danielle is a customer experience architect at Prime Therapeutics, a pharmacy benefits management organization with the mission of helping people get the medicine they need to feel better and live well. Danielle leads teams and collaborates with key partners to deliver outstanding experiences to members, providers, clients, and her fellow employees. Danielle's background is in marketing, sales, business development, and social impact. These passions have led her to work in many geographies, from Washington, D.C. to India and to Chicago, Illinois, and before returning and settling in her hometown of Minneapolis. She holds a BA in English from Davidson College and an MBA from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. Welcome to the program, Danielle.
Thank you so much for having me, Carl.
You're welcome. So let's start here. I'm very curious. You're an English major with a background in branding, marketing, sales, and communication. So how did you get into the customer experience discipline in the first place? And how do you view the relationship between those other disciplines and customer experience? I know I've asked you two questions in one there, and I apologize for that, but if you need a reminder, let me know.
Absolutely. No, I think it's a great question. So I've always been very passionate about understanding people, understanding how they tick, and understanding how best to communicate them and move them to action that's going to benefit themselves, benefit their communities, and benefit society as a whole. And so when I was in college, I really fell in love with language as a great tool for that. I was an English major, focused in poetry, but I was always very focused on the practical implications of language, became very interested in branding, this opportunity to distill down the essence of something into a few key words and design. And after graduating, I went to work for a creative agency in Washington, D.C., and did marketing and creative strategy for primarily for international nonprofits, for government initiatives, and really enjoyed that work. And then went on to lead marketing, sales, and business development for two social enterprises in India. And so always really love those disciplines, still love those disciplines, but started in India to realize that I was starting to become very interested in how do you deliver on the promises that you're making for customers? How do you make sure that you're living up to that brand that you're putting forth into the world? And so that led me to customer experience. And so when I pursued my MBA, I started looking at opportunities to go in that route and explore opportunities that would focus on optimizing customer experiences. But I didn't leave those other disciplines behind necessarily. And so now in my role today, we of course look at all of the possible avenues to improve customer experiences, but I do believe that effective communication is one of the cheapest and most effective ways to improve customer experiences. And so I can give an example. We work in the health insurance space, and some of the impacts we're managing for members have the potential to be perceived as negative. And we use proactive communications to set expectations and support our members through the changes that we're asking them to make. So this turns experiences that could be perceived as negative into neutral or possibly even positive experiences. So one way we're doing that, I'm leading a team now to leverage communications in an initiative to transition our members, which is our word for patients, from one set of pharmacies to another. And in order to do that, which could be perceived as something frustrating, you have to make a change from what you're used to, we're using several communication strategies. So we're using letters, custom landing pages, personalized phone calls to make sure that they're aware of the change, how it might benefit them, and what, if any, action they need to take to transition. So far, we've supported more than 15,000 members in their transition, and by and large, it's gone very smoothly.
Yeah, you mentioned change. Is there any particular change model that you use for that, or is it something that you pretty much developed yourself?
Yeah, well, I love the ADKAR model of change, and that's the one I tend to use in my work most often. So trying to figure out where in the spectrum, like what a customer's primary needs are. Is it more, are they more in the space where they're not even aware of what's going on, versus are they aware but they don't really know what the details are or what they need to do, all the way through, is it more about desire? Is it that they're resistant to wanting the change? So by figuring out where people are at, I think that's always a great starting point to then figuring out what kind of a strategy and what kind of communications to deploy.
Yeah, when you were describing it, I was thinking, it almost like ADKAR came right to the top of my mind because it sounded ADKAR approach. So that's interesting that's kind of the approach you use. We're big fans of ADKAR at Horizon CX. In fact, we teach that in our course. We introduce people to that model. It's just such a nice, easy model to use for any kind of a change, personal or organizational. So. And I thank you for tying those things together, because I think, brand promises and communications are really key things, especially communications. I worked with a local bank that had done an evaluation of all their written and verbal communications, and they were surprised at what they found. They came back with the answer to themselves: if we can't understand this, what do we expect our customers to do? Really
Wow.
key stuff. So another aspect of customer experience, and I've heard you talk about this, I think you talked about this in one of the podcasts before that I heard, specifically around complexity and having multiple customer types, multiple entities involved in delivering experiences. Can you share a bit more about this and your interest in it and how you've seen it play out in your work?
Absolutely. Yeah, I am very interested in this question of complexity, because the world is only getting more complex, and whether that's, looking at all of the different kinds of customers we're serving at once, and how they're interrelated, or looking at all of the entities that need to come together in order to deliver quality experiences. I think that the ability to manage these complex ecosystems is one of the most underappreciated skill sets of customer experience practitioners. Rarely is a journey just a really simple, top line, single customer experience deliverer. Those are great, I think, educational tools when you can boil it down like that. But a lot of times there's a lot going on beneath the surface that we need to look at and target in order to find what will make the most difference. So I think part of the reason why I've become so interested in this is because I do work in the American healthcare system. My company works in just one part of that system primarily. We work in the pharmacy benefits, or basically prescription medicine part of the health insurance landscape. So fairly targeted. And even just with us, we have our members, which are patients, their caregivers, their families, every aspect of the healthcare system. So doctors, nurses, administrative folks in clinics, pharmacy techs, health insurance plans, employers that provide health insurance. And then you have all the technology, healthcare technology systems, data providers, vendors. Then you have community nonprofits, government entities, pharmaceutical companies. I mean, it's just incredible, all of the things to consider when looking at how do we just deliver quality healthcare to people and give them what they need to, as my company says, feel better and live well. So that's, I think, a big has been a big spark for me in just saying, wow, this is this is hard. This is incredibly hard, and it can be challenging in our role, especially because we don't always have the direct conversation with members. Members are primarily having conversation directly with their doctor, for example, or with their pharmacist, and potentially with their health insurance plan. And so we have to, in my company, be creative in thinking about, okay, what how can we get information in the right places in order to make sure that the people who are having those conversations with patients can provide it to them. So it ends up being very creative and nuanced in that way. So I kind of alluded to the fact that we do think a lot about how do we maximize the ability for care providers to do their best work, whether that is, making sure that they do have easy access to information about how much things are going to cost. So if they have two options for a patient and one is going to be cost prohibitive for that member and the other works just as well and not going to be, that's information that we know physicians and their members want to have. Or, if we can manage the prior authorizations we're asking them to submit, there's a role for prior authorizations, but can we make sure that the process is as streamlined as possible, that the questions we're asking are easy to answer, et cetera. So that's some of the ways that we think about this in my particular world. And I used to be jealous, frankly, of some of my peers that work in other kinds of organizations because, oh, wow, must it just be nice to have that direct relationship with the customer and you just control everything, and, thinking grass is greener a little bit. And then I started to realize that just about every major organization, every kind of big experience that customers go through often does have many entities and stakeholders that are playing a role. So even something like retail, I had an experience with a retailer not that long ago where they lost an item that they were repairing for me that was very expensive when they were sending it back to me. And it was really complicated to try to get that resolved. And there wasn't really any way they had set up to handle those situations. There was not really any coordination or communication between the shipping company and the store and then the repair center, their contact center. Everybody was just kind of sending me all over the place. And of course, as customer, we know, like, customers don't care whose fault it is. You just want them to fix it. And so this was my lesson in, hey, it's this kind of a challenge exists everywhere. And so I'm very interested in models and tools to help multiple entities work together to deliver quality experience so that these things don't happen. I do think it's possible. I think there can be some advantages where, different organizations may specialize and be experts in different types of things, but if there's not actually that piping connecting all of them, it can really make it hard on customers.
Yeah, I think you said it when you were talking about and tying the communication. That's so critical, especially in a complex landscape like you're in right now. I kind of relate to that too, because through this pandemic here, telemedicine just became prominent. I mean, I haven't seen physically my doctor in well over a year. And but we Zoom all the time. Anytime I have an issue or if I have a physical, we're doing this over telemedicine. So, it's that you add that to the complexity of the situation. And what you said there about those experiences, whether they're in even a less more retail field or something like that. I think it's all about the design, right? That's where experience design really comes into the picture here. And it sounds like you've done some pretty significant work there at Prime Therapeutics with that. Just, maybe one more question here. You've done a lot of work with employee experience. So what would you say, I'm curious, what would you say to someone who wonders whether and why that's a good investment? And what difference have you seen it make in your world?
Thank you. Well, I realize that with this audience, I may be preaching to the choir. So hopefully this can be more something I think is useful to share with people who have the opportunity to invest in employee experience. It often baffles me that companies are more willing to invest in the experiences of their customers than their employees, as if those two things exist totally separately. But as we all know, the barriers employees face often have a very direct impact on their ability to deliver for customers. It's, I was talking just a moment ago about the ways in which barriers care providers face. If we make it really difficult for them to get information about medicine, well, guess what? They can't give that to members. It's the same with our employees. If we make it difficult to do their job, then they can't deliver. And there's real productivity costs. There's real customer dissatisfaction that can result. It's not just feel good stuff, or even employee retention, which is important. There is real bottom line impact. So I'm going to share a couple of things that I've had the privilege of working on in my company that address those kinds of issues. So one is with our IT department. My team estimated that employees wasted roughly $500,000 annually just struggling to submit requests for service using our internal software system. And so that did not account for a lot of the other challenges they were facing, but we said, okay, we'll manage or measure just the amount of time for this particular task. And it was a lot. That's dollars in their employee time that they're not spending doing their jobs. And so we used that data to secure investment and design and build a new system that now saves our company money by increasing productivity while reducing employee stress in the process. In my work with our HR department, we looked at the employee onboarding process, and there were two really big impacts that were happening based on the way we were doing things at the time. So one was people didn't have their equipment and the access they needed day one to be ready to dive into their job. And so we know on an emotional level, that kind of is a signal that we don't particularly value you, et cetera. But from a productivity cost, that's work that they're not doing, right? That's time that they're not getting up to speed. And so we worked to address that and make sure that they had everything they needed from the very beginning. And then the other thing we looked at was this issue of just feeling connected to our company and understanding what our company does. I've talked a little bit about what my company does today, and most people have never heard of pharmacy benefit managers. And so there's a bit of a learning curve, and we were not investing in our employees' understanding of what we do early enough, and in a way that was convenient for them. We were starting to have employees that were located all over the country, even though our training was on location. And also it was at a specific time when people needed to be able to access it at any time. And so instead, we now have online information and training, both available before you start, if you're interested in starting to learn about what you can look forward to. And then especially after you start, we have several learning modules that help people get up to speed, help them feel a part of the community, as well as a virtual welcome group and community that they're part of for their roughly their first year at Prime, to help them get acclimated, understand the broader company, and feel really included and equipped to contribute. So these, both the work with IT and HR has done a lot to make sure that employees can be productive as well as happy. And both of those things are valuable, but I think they're both worth using in an effort to convince those who have investment dollars to make these changes.
Yeah, it really sounds like CX is really integrated in your organization. And I mean, I'm going to assume that you've been a kind of a catalyst in making that happen and happen. And a couple of things you said there when you're talking about, ease of doing customer, you also talk about ease of doing business with customers, but how about ease of doing my job for employees? Such a critical thing. And in our courses, we talk about that because we talk about the service profit chain, which is, it's got some history behind it here, but those connections, those are such key connections to have in an organization. It sounds like it's pretty well entrenched there at Prime Therapeutics. One more question, if I may. I think we have time. You were honored recently through the Customer Experience Professionals Association with an Emerging Leader in Customer Experience Award. That's quite an honor. And I just wondered if you can just share with us, how that, just a little bit about how that came about and how that's perhaps helping you right now within the work that you do.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carl. Yes, the Emerging Leaders Award was such an honor to receive in its inaugural year here, and such a boost to my career. I am very grateful for this recognition and opportunity it provides. One of the great things about the Emerging Leader program is that it's not just a one-time announcement per se. It's really a program that you get to be a part of, whereby the coolest thing to me with the program is that we've gotten to meet some of the most foremost leaders in customer experience over the course of a month. We had every single week meetings with, all the names you've ever heard of, and got advice from them. And so just to get that kind of access and advice at this stage was really invaluable. And, I've continued, I'm partnering with Valerie Peck now on helping our IT department to benchmark and improve what they're doing. So, these connections are already starting to pay off. And then also the connections with the other awardees and nominees as well has been really valuable. So I'm very appreciative of the CXPA for developing this opportunity, and I'm excited to make the most of it.
How exciting, how exciting. Well, Danielle, thanks so much for your time today and sharing your story, and hopefully inspiring more of those within the customer experience discipline on how they can take their practice to a higher and more mature level. I hope everyone has enjoyed this brief but insightful discussion we're calling Unsung CX Heroes. I invite everyone to listen to any previous podcasts and to be in the queue for more episodes of Unsung CX Heroes. Visit the Horizon CX website listed here on the screen and subscribe to the blog series, since that will automatically put you in the queue for not only our monthly blogs, but also for our Unsung CX Heroes podcast announcements. And thank you once again, Danielle, and thank you everyone for listening.